Samson, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Brenda. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Your new book is A Theater for Dreamers, and it's available at the Novel Neighbor. And it's a gorgeous book. I love the title, which I want to ask you about in a minute. But first, I want you to tell us where you're joining us from.
Well, I am on the roof of a house in London, and I didn't intend to be up here. And I've had to come up on the roof because A, it's really hot in the house. And also it's really noisy because there are neighbours who have building work across the way. But I'm not usually here at all. I haven't been here for 15 months in London. I've been locked down in the countryside. So it's all really sort of thrilling, actually, to be somewhere that isn't a green field or a farm.
Right. And you've got a large clan, so to speak, right? So you've had, for lockdown, you've actually had kind of a party going, right?
It's been, I mean, it's mercifully not just the two of us. It's it was just at that moment actually that my youngest daughter Romany was going off to drama school, and we were just getting sort of ready to live just the two of us for the first time in our long relationship, 29 years, and we were about to be completely empty nested when the pandemic hit, and they were all at our house when lockdown happened, so they just got locked down with us, which actually was, well, certainly for us was wonderful. We got a whole extra year of family life, and they kept us very cheerful, and we did our best to keep them cheerful, and we kept very, very busy actually, because my book came out the moment of lockdown in the UK, and my oldest son's book also came out that year. His book came out in August. It was a memoir. So we were really busy. And then we started some live streams, which before the pandemic hit, we would never have thought that we were the sort of people to do that, but we really kind of enjoyed it in the end. We called ourselves the Von Trapped family as a sort of reference to The Sound of Music. But yes, so it was a busy year, that first year of the pandemic, yes.
And your Twitter feed is so fun to go through because you can just see all the different things you're doing. And I understand, did your kids now build you like a Greek restaurant set or backdrop for all of these interviews you're doing? Or
yeah, it actually was serendipitous. It's the reason that some of them got locked down with us, actually, because they were putting the finishing touches to it. What it was we had this lovely plan we had booked to do some live shows, because David wanted to play some Leonard Cohen songs, and we'd written this song together that came out of the book called Yes, I Have Ghosts. And there was my book, and there were other people who had some films to show that had been shot on Hydra. And we had this whole event that had been booked into various cities in the UK and literary festivals. And my son had just finished a degree in set design, and he really, really wanted to build the set of the Katsikas grocery store, which is where a lot of the action happens, and in both the novel and in real life. And my daughter-in-law is also a set designer, so they were busy building the set that was supposed to be part of this roadshow when lockdown happened. So they got locked down because they were building the set. And then the set was so beautiful. I wish I was in it now. It'd be a lot quieter than here. And the set was so beautiful, and I was rather crestfallen and thought, well, that's it. No one will ever know that I've written that. I spent years writing this book, and so I was a bit sort of crestfallen. And then, my son just said, "It's fine. We'll just do some live streams, and we'll pretend we're in a Greek taverna." And that's how it all started.
So this is a beautiful book. The writing is so achingly beautiful that there were times where I almost had to even put it down just because you could just feel the emotion, and it was heavy stuff. Tell me about the story of A Theater for Dreamers.
Well, it's based on real people and imaginary people, and it's set in the year 1960 on the Greek island of Hydra, which is an incredibly beautiful island. And on that island, there was a bohemian community of writers and artists who became quite famous because Leonard Cohen was one of them. When he was a 25-year-old poet, before he would ever thought to be a songwriter, he went to this island to write his first novel. And on the island already were a sort of fledgling group of writers and artists, and he was sort of welcomed into this group of fascinating people. I mean, there was Charmian Clift, an amazing writer, married to the Australian war reporter and novelist George Johnston, Goran Tunstrom, an amazing Swedish writer, Gordon Merrick, who was an American writer, the sort of Judith Krantz of gay literature, really, who's credited with sort of being the bridge between E.M. Forster and Edmund White, and a fascinating man, you know, in his own right. And so there was an established group of people. And what happened to me, the reason I got so interested in it, was that I went to Hydra just on holiday when I'd finished my last novel, and with no sense that I was there to write anything, just to relax with my family, really. And in the house where we were staying was a memoir written in 1955 by Charmian Clift about her family's life on Hydra. And I mean, this was an incredible thing to do in the 50s and even into the 60s, because, you know, there's no airport, there are no roads. It's a very, very basic island. And there was certainly no mass tourism in those days. And not a lot of people were going to live on Mediterranean islands, and particularly not with, you know, family of small children, and to live off writing. And that is what she set out to do. And she wrote this amazing memoir about it that just fired my imagination. So when I got back to England, I Googled her, found some biographies, got absolutely entranced even more by this character, and then looked at the photographs of her. And there would be no photographs of her really existing had it not been for the fact that Leonard Cohen, when he arrived as a 25-year-old, stayed with her and became part of this community. And these photographs, I mean, a lot of people will have seen them. I mean, they exist because Leonard's in them mainly. And it's what is purported to be his first concert is the most famous one, where he's playing his guitar, sitting beneath a tree with this circle of wonderful bohemians around him. And next to him is Charmian Clift, and her head is on his shoulder.
Now, you are part of a creative family, a creative partnership. Your husband, David Gilmour, from Pink Floyd. So you can certainly relate to all of these characters so much in this novel.
Yes, yes. I mean, one of the things that sort of got me hooked, several things got me hooked, but one of the things that got me hooked was that my character, Charmian Clift, collaborated with her husband, George Johnston. And I collaborate with my husband, David Gilmour, on writing songs. So I'm always interested in married couples who collaborate on artistic projects. So that was one of the main starting points, and something I wanted to investigate. And I just got immersed in that world. And I didn't, for quite a long time, know quite how I was going to tell the story, but I knew that there was a story to be told, because it was a very, very interesting time for women, particularly, because there they were living these lives of supposed freedom, but they actually had very little freedom. So I thought it was a very interesting moment. And then so I, for a couple of years, sort of did nothing but research it and wonder how to tell the story. And then I was on Hydra when Leonard Cohen died. And at the same time, there was the news of the American election. I mean, I don't know if people remember, the news came at the same time. And I just heard Erica's voice in my ear say, oh, well, at least Leonard's been spared this. And that was the starting point. That's how my main character came to me. And I knew then that I wanted to tell the story through the eyes of a young girl who had gone to Hydra, really to look for role models and to work out what her life should be like. And so that was how Erica was born. It's her story and the story of sort of women of that age. And it's a story of how lucky we are now in many ways to have a much greater equality. So Erica is 18 at the start of the novel, and she, her mother has died. She has been stuck in London with a father who has shell shock, although shell shock isn't something that people knew about then, but who is not a good man for her to be living with. He's very demanding. He expects her to sort of wait on him hand and foot, and to, the expectation for Erica at that point in London was that she should meet a man and marry him, and and be a good wife. And Erica isn't so sure that this is what she wants. She also has her first boyfriend, who is a sort of freewheeling poet called Jimmy. And really what she wants to do is go somewhere and sleep with Jimmy, which she can't do under her father's roof. He keeps a very tight control on her. She sort of says at the start of the book that had it been the Middle Ages, he would have had her in a cast iron chastity belt, and he doesn't let that boy over the doorstep. He just sees him as bad influence. So when her mother dies, she finds that she's been left a sort of small amount of money, and it's enough to go to Hydra. And the sort of catalyst is that Charmian Clift, I make her a friend of Erica's mother, and Charmian Clift invites Erica to come to Hydra. And Erica arrives in Hydra with Jimmy and with her brother. And really, it's a sort of coming of age among these amazing people who are trying out all these new ways of living. And, Erica is a wide-eyed ingenue. Nobody has bothered to imagine any sort of other future for her. So she feels, I think she sort of describes herself as, her mother always said to her, the world is your oyster. And her response was always to think, well, what a horrible thing it would be to be inside an oyster. But suddenly, it's the world is everything. She could go in any direction. And it's through her eyes that we get to be in this community of real people who I've researched. And she, in a way, she started for me as a sort of thinking of her as more as a portal, that I didn't really want to tell her story so much as have her put the reader right in the middle of this community. But actually, as fictional characters tend to do, she kind of grew and took over and sort of found her place sort of in my heart, really. And so she became, she became as real to me as anyone else.
Erica, what she does is very brave and rebellious, but she's not actually very rebellious. She's very lonely, really, in England now with her mother gone. And she just wants to feel things and see things and live.
Yeah, and she wants to find out her mother, when her mother dies, she says to her, dare to live your dreams. But Erica hasn't dared to have any dreams, partly because of the constrictions of society and her patrician father, but also, I think that there is something very interesting about women of 18. It's always fascinating. It's very vivid to me, that period of life. And it's that thing where you're sort of straddling being a girl, being a woman, you're not quite sure who you are. It's very hard if you haven't been set on a course by parents with a sort of vision for you, or if you'd had a vision for yourself. It's that feeling of amorphous, who am I? What am I supposed to do now? And so I find that a really fascinating moment in women's lives. It was certainly a fascinating moment in my life. I had no idea who I was or what I wanted to be. And so, I think it's about trying to express that. The other thing, of course, was that my daughter Romany, who was, she was, I've got a photograph of her the first time we went to Hydra, standing outside what had been Charmian Clift's house. And there she is, this tiny little girl. And when I finished the novel, she was the same age as Erica. So I think it was partly on my mind because I was trying to imagine what her life might be. So, I think it is a really fascinating age and a vivid age. That moment between childhood and womanhood.
And you dedicated this novel to Romany.
Yes, well, she made me, actually. But she deserved it. She was very, very, it was lovely having her around while I was writing it, to have a woman who is a young woman to sort of run things by. She was an incredibly helpful person, actually, because she was interested in it. And I always have to do a lot of reading aloud, and it's usually to my husband, but actually Romany bore the brunt of some of that as well, and she did it very cheerfully. And she knows me very well, and she knows that when I'm in the grip of writing, that I forget to eat and I forget to drink. And she was so sweet because she was old enough now to sort of all my children, she was the one who really got it. And she used to sort of come very quietly and put a cup of tea and a piece of toast on my desk, and without demanding anything. She was a sort of perfect perfect sort of muse in the old-fashioned sense. Yeah.
And she sings and plays harp, right, on the song that grew out of this novel.
It wasn't intended. So she's got a beautiful voice, and but her ambitions are in other areas, so which it makes it actually quite refreshing. And she's always sung with David, and he has always enjoyed, that thing when she was little, he would get her to sing things, and he's always enjoyed doing that. And we've always known that she could sing. And at the beginning of lockdown, she'd had 4 harp lessons, but she really took to the harp. She really seemed to have some natural affinity with the harp. And so when we started doing the live streams, she would just, at the beginning, we persuaded her to just sit and play the harp as we all sort of wandered in and sat down. And then she would sort of, and what the thing that she was playing was the melody from this song, Yes, I Have Ghosts, that I had written with David at when we'd finished the book, that's very much comes out of the book. And he hadn't had a chance to finish that because lockdown had also come at the time when he had been finishing the track in the studio, and so he wasn't able to get the backing singer in, and there were other bits of string instruments that he wanted to put on it that he wasn't able to. And then as these live streams progressed, Romany would sit playing the harp, and then they started playing Leonard Cohen songs, and she would sing the harp, the melody. And then we just suddenly kind of realized that what we needed to finish the song was right in front of us. And so Romany actually played the harp and sang harmony vocals on it, and that is the version that's out there, on iTunes and Spotify and all those things. And it's just lovely because it was sort of organic the way it came about, and now I can't imagine it with anyone else singing it.
The title of the song is a really poignant moment and line in the book, and is that an actual phrase from Charmian, or
it's something she whispered in my ear? So it's a scene in the book where Erica, so in the novel, Erica is constantly sort of plaguing Charmian. She really has sort of latched on to Charmian, but Charmian is quite, has moments of being kind of maternal and moments of holding back for reasons that I won't do any spoilers. I mean, there are quite dramatic things in Charmian's life that govern the way that she relates to Erica. And at one point they're in the graveyard on Hydra, and Erica says to Charmian, "Do you believe in ghosts?" And Charmian says, for reasons that become clearer in the novel, "Yes, I have ghosts, not all of them dead." And as I wrote that line, I kind of got the prickles on my back of the neck, because I suddenly thought, oh, that is a lyric. And I was sort of, halfway through the book, I knew I didn't want to stop. So I wrote it on a Post-it, and I thought, that's my prize for when I finish, is I will finish that lyric, because what that line refers to is that feeling that everyone, I think it's so general, that if you've had a rift in your life, it could be, that that you've been separated for all sorts of reasons, but often, a rift in a relationship or a love affair, and you, for the rest of your life, think you see that person, and yet they're not dead, but they're haunting you because you sort of see them just in your periphery vision. When you get a train, you look out of the window, you see them on the platform, and it is to do somehow with unfinished business. And so I kind of knew then that I was going to write a song on that subject and with that line. So that's where it came from.
Right. And you and your husband, you were a lyricist with your husband. You've collaborated on a lot of songs that your husband's fans and your fans know, right, through his work.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote lyrics for the Division Bell album, when we were just, girlfriend and boyfriend. That was a long time ago.
We should mention too for readers that Erica is chasing down a secret that she thinks there's a secret out there. And when you sort of look at the cover of A Theater for Dreamers, you're kind of washed over with this beautiful sun and the scenery of what's coming. But there's a mystery. There are some mysteries within this story as well.
Yes, I can't spoil them. There is a mystery. There's some very clear evidence that Charmian knows something about Erica's dead mother, and it's something to do with some secret lover. When Erica's mother dies, she leaves Erica this money that no one can work out where it's come from. It's in a post office savings account. But even more mysteriously, she leaves Erica's brother a porcelain green convertible car. And no one knew she'd owned it. And so that is where the mystery starts. And Erica knows that Charmian knows something. And so that was what sets her off on the journey to Hydra in the first place. And yeah, and then there are other mysteries within it. I mean, Charmian is also keeping secrets, and Erica becomes a bit of a sleuth, really, trying both to find out things about her own dead mother, but also she just isn't ever sure that Charmian's telling her the truth about anything. And Charmian's quite slippery.
There are a lot of dark and tragic elements to this story. How did you balance that while writing it without sort of getting buried in that? And was that a challenge as a writer to try to keep the balance of the magic of the island, but also the dark side of just human nature too?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of darkness in the, when I researched. I mean, there were times when I was sort of weeping, actually, when I, because people start so hopeful, and most of the trajectories of these people was not, they were mainly had tragic endings, and it was particularly tragic for the children. I mean, the children really suffered, and I mean, I'm not gonna spoil it, but towards the end of the book, you find out what happened to several of the children of the main characters, and they didn't have happy outcomes. And so I knew all of these dark things, but actually the island itself and youth, the promise of youth, is the thing that kept it light. So I didn't want to not have those dark undertones, and a lot of the dark undertones were to do with the treatment of women and children. But I wanted it to feel it's written in the first person, it's written in the present tense, and the main thing I wanted to do was to let the reader enjoy the experience. I wanted the reader to feel that they were absolutely there in the middle of all of those people, and so I don't sort of lay it on with a trowel, the darkness. I let people just sort of let it develop, and for people to sort of feel it themselves, and to feel it sort of just, it's coming, but at the same time you can enjoy this beautiful island and being among so many sort of wonderful people, actually wonderful, creative, talented people. Yeah, I mean, it is ultimately a tragedy.
This is your 5th novel, and it was a huge hit, really, right? It was one of those strange things where it hit really at just the right time, where it's a beautiful story, but there was also this hunger for this window into another world during the lockdown. You've been on so many years' best lists. Did you, as an author, I mean, yeah, it's wonderful. You've been you've been doing this for a while, but what's it like to see how a book is received? I mean, it's got to be nerve-wracking and exciting and strange. And
yeah, well, I mean, I've been very lucky. So I've written, this is my 3rd novel, and I've had 2 collections of short stories, and I've always been very lucky because I'm like anyone, you're terrified about what the reviews are going to be like, and I've always, I need to touch wood when I say this. I've never had mean reviews. I've always had lovely reviews, so that bit was all right, but I've never had a hit before, so this has been very, very nice. And it's been lovely also that a lot of readers, I suppose because we've been trapped in our homes, a lot of people emailed me when they'd read it to say, I feel like I've been on a Greek island, and that has been so nice. And actually, I've had some wonderful correspondence. I mean, I've had a lot of people, as it turns out, people who are in this community at various points have been in touch. The best one was a man who's in his late 80s who emailed me and said, I cannot believe that you weren't part of our group. And then he told me who he was, and he is actually someone who appears in a photograph with Leonard Cohen, and he was someone I'd never identified, and he had been there at the time, and he lives in Canada, and he'd been Leonard Cohen's great friend because they were both Canadians, and he's become, we write to each other all the time now because, he really knew these people, and so that's been really lovely. And then another lovely moment was when one of Leonard Cohen's band got in touch and just sent the most wonderful email, and then sent me a gold ring that Leonard Cohen had given her, and I felt like I'd been anointed at that point. But and then just how I've been astonished at how many people have been in touch, and it's lovely. There isn't a day that I don't have an email from someone who's read it and wanted to say hi, and that's actually kept me going through this period. That's been a lovely start to the day. It's just lovely emails from readers, and I've never had that. I mean, I've had people, in the real world, you meet your friends and they say, I read your book and I liked it, but I've never had such a sort of inpouring of emails from strangers, and that I thoroughly recommend it. Yeah, it's a lovely thing to happen.
And it's such a compliment as a writer for someone who lived the story to say, oh, you got it right.
That was that moment. The moment I got his email was, I mean, it reduced me to tears. It was just lovely. It was lovely. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that is so obvious in speaking with you is that not only has this book affected your readers, but it's affected you so deeply. And I imagine has changed you in many ways as a writer and an artist and a female.
Yeah, I can't shake this book. Actually, I'm still, because the research was labyrinthine, because there were so many people who were really there, and and I wanted to get to know them all. It hasn't stopped. I still find new things about them, little snippets that fascinate me, and I'm still in touch with a lot of the people who were there, and who were the children who were there, and one or two people on the island, who I interviewed. Yeah, I still have this deep connection to Hydra. I can't wait to go back. Actually, I'm so longing to go back, and these people feel very real to me. I mean, they were real, but they feel like they're still in my head. I always get this at the end of a book, it has to be said. I mean, at the end of my last novel, The Kindness, I thought I might have to just write a sequel. It's that thing, you've spent so long with your imaginary friends. How do you say goodbye to your imaginary friends? It's not when you've finished writing the book. They carry on talking to you, and it's pleasurable, actually. I mean, and it's also sad to think that one day you won't wake up and the first thing you'll be thinking about is them.
Polly Samson, thank you so much for speaking with us. It's been so lovely to talk to you and just to enjoy this book, and excited to see what your next book is.
Brenda, thank you so much. I've loved talking to you. Thank you.
I passed through the station, a face in the crowd. The whistle was blowing, the barrier